see that.
Changes to my companies.
Yeah.
Here's one extra.
No,
That's what you
we'll
gave me
go to-
before.
We'll go to the one
Yes.
email we're on iPad.
Yeah.
We'll have it with one we made on iPad. Let me see.
We also have people who have no business even speaking about anything, they have no standing, they don't shout about things.
Hey.
How's it going?
Good.
Joe?
Oh, so you're right here? Well, we're going to sit.
Perfect.
Right here.
Thank you.
Sounds good, a little more.
Okay, Mike, so, just so you know, last week, we had our budget meeting in 30 minutes, so.
There we go. There we go. All right. There we go.
We're not setting
No
expectations
pressure.
or anything.
No pressure.
Which department was that?
That was the fire.
Fire.
Fire?
It was a small
Everybody
one.
likes the firemen, so.
All right, let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. It is 6 p.m. Do we have any public comment? Anybody want to add anything? Okay. Let's get right into the 2023 police department budget. And one of the things I wanted to bring up, there's a lot of kind of confusion and things I see either on Facebook or just talking about our long-term debts. And if you can explain that a little bit in simple terms, so we could talk about that, we can have that on the table.
Sure, thank you, Chairman Lennon, and the item that was brought up in social media is the city's $306 million debt that's on our city's overall statement of net position. That $306 million is primarily our police and fire pension liability. Now, of course, City Council was able to address that liability. That is a liability over 30 years. It really is required, the state statute required that liability be 90% funded by 2040, I believe is the latest news. The city council unanimously approved to finalize fully funding the police and fire pension funds. The city was able to do so at an interest rate of a little bit under 3%. Otherwise, if they would have left that liability unaddressed, then the percentage interest would have been 6.5%. So an enormous cost savings to the city's taxpayers. And again, that's reflective accounting-wise. It's required that even if it's a liability payable over 30 years, we have to put it on the city's overall statement of position.
Okay, thank you.
And then with the pensions, if we don't fund what we're supposed to, then they have the full right to go after our dollars that we get, our revenue from the state, correct?
That's correct. That's correct, yes.
All right, thank you. All right, let's get into the actual budget conversation.
So we worked together with Commander Oshner as far as evaluating the revenues and expenses for we're comparing, we looked at 2022's actual results posted so far, and that served as a basis for us projecting what we expect in 2023, and then additional years 2024 through 2026. That's the document that the reports that you see, the budget worksheet report. It's a 6-page report, and it lays out all the operating revenues and expenditures. First, we will talk about the revenues. Revenues in our system, we have those transactions posted throughout, sometime over the summer. There's still pending transactions that need to be captured and reconciled from our department, but we were able to work with Commander Oshner and his team to get an indication of where things are trending up into September with the bigger dollar revenue categories. Commander Oshner, you can maybe make some commentary on the bigger items like the parking tickets and some of the other fines and penalties. What are you seeing so far on that as far as the revenues go?
Well, we transitioned, between 2020 and 2021, we transitioned into a electronic system, so there was a little bit of a learning curve there. We had some limitations based on equipment availability to issue the electronic tickets. And I think that we're definitely trending back in a positive direction. The learning curve is over with. We've had the time to deploy the right equipment and get enough people out there. So I think we're back on track there.
Correct. And the other thing to add as well is that we have receivables out there from prior years. The city has transitioned to the only certified through the state, one of the only certified state third-party collection agencies. And we completed that transition with them sometime early in the summer. And we expect those past due receivables, we're already seeing an uptick in collections, which will further add in those revenues. It's a little bit difficult right now to determine how much we can expect in 2023, but in recent months we are seeing an uptick. So we're still gonna, for 2023, we're gonna keep it close to the projected 2022 amount, maybe a little bit over at close to 4.5 million overall. But of course, that consists of our parking tickets, our red light photo enforcement, as well. Those are the two main drivers of those revenues.
With regards to parking tickets, I was told by Chief Semaglia like about a month ago or so that you were having issues with staffing, so you were not able to write as many tickets as you had in the past. Is that something that's going to be a problem for the foreseeable future, or is that need been taken care of or looking at being addressed?
That's somewhat unpredictable. We've had some staff shortages over the last couple of years, both on the police side, on the auxiliary police side, and on the community service officer side. We were down approximately 4 community service officers earlier this year. One's on long-term medical. Actually, we had 2 on long-term medical. The auxiliary contingency went from approximately 62 officers down to 28. We're in the process of building that staff back up there. So it's kind of one of those things that kind of ebbs and wins. We're hoping to get back up to full staff here, but we might get hit again. And if we do get hit and we have a staffing shortage, essential services is going to be the focus, and obviously parking tickets is going to take a backseat.
Right, but in terms of like forecasting for the next year, we don't think that that's something that we need to take into consideration right now?
Not right now, no. We have a class of approximately 32 auxiliary officers being trained right now. We're back to full staff on the CSOs, and we're only down 1 full-time officer right now.
Okay, sounds good, thank you.
And they graduate in December?
I believe it's
I think it's December. And does that increase the, obviously the overtime for that as well? If we're down CSOs or we're down officers in general, we're working overtime?
Yeah, absolutely. The overtime, you'll probably see that once we get to the salary aspect of it. Yeah, we've had some hits in that department because we've had to take less employees and do more work with them, so they've had to work more hours in all of those different categories in order to make up the difference.
Okay. One thing that concerns me moving forward is the red light cameras. They're going to be redoing construction on Cermak and Harlem, and therefore those cameras will be down. I know the cameras are not popular in the community, but they do bring a significant amount of revenue into our city. So as we move forward, if it's a year or 2 or whatever that is, knocking off $2.3 million out of our budgets is going to hurt, and it's going to be a problem for us. So, just throw that out there.
When are we anticipating that?
I'm not sure. I mean, I think it's going to be in the next couple of years. because they're gonna redo that intersection there. And when they do, anytime they change anything, then they take the cameras away, and then, they bring them back. It might be a couple of years before they bring them back.
The state hasn't given any definitive dates. I, speaking with our public works director a couple weeks ago, so there's nothing set in stone, so it might happen within the next few years, but we don't know exactly when.
And sometimes they don't give us a really long-term, aware, they don't tell
No,
us.
they'll be like, "It's happening."
All of a sudden, it's like, next week we're gonna
Right,
start this, so.
right.
Yeah. Again, we'll continue to monitor the revenues as they're being posted and go forward from there. I think the next thing we will look toward is the expenditures. First, we'll look at the general operating expenditures. Again, these are utilities, vehicle gas and oil, or training. Utilities and vehicles, gas and oil, of course, we have to be aware of inflationary pressures on these expenditures. We're budgeting to accommodate any, right now, the inflation rate is somewhere between 5 and 10%. We'll be conservative, we will look to budget accordingly in 2023, 2026. The other thing, Commander Osterby, if you can comment on the training. We have before us, City Administrator Sabergreen furnished us these unfunded police mandates.
Which
Just
originally came from Commander Oshner.
Oh, okay. If you can comment further on these unfunded mandates and the training that's required to be able to accommodate these mandates.
Right, so our training budget here is probably on the low end. It's hard to predict, so I didn't want to just throw a number out there. We have, as this sheet points out here, we have about 94 mandated hours of continuing education training per officer per year. It's 116 officers, that translates to about 10,900 hours of work lost. So we get hit on multiple ends here. We get hit on, somebody has to pay somebody to train these officers. Then we have to take the officers off of their original jobs, and then in most cases, we have to hire somebody at overtime to backfill and replace them while they're in training. And the problem that we've been having is that, the entire state has these same mandates, so every other police officer in the state is trying to get into these classes. They're not available. So in order to keep our officers certified, we've been finding the need to send them out of state in order to meet the mandates, otherwise they'll get decertified, because there's just simply not enough training available for the officers to do what they need to do. So this is just kind of a projection here. We really can't put our hands around it until we really know what the State Training and Standards Board is gonna do. There's certain mandates that are required that they don't have curriculum for yet. There's a mandate but no curriculum. There's a mandate that they must be completed by a state certified training officer. In some cases, there is no curriculum to certify anybody to be a state training officer. So we're running into a lot of brick walls with that. As we move forward, if everything does happen the way that it's supposed to happen, it's gonna be a considerable expense. It's just not all gonna be in the training category. It's gonna be in training, it's gonna be in software, because we do a lot of our training through software. It's gonna be in overtime. So some of these numbers here are gonna be spread out through all three of those categories, so it's a little bit deceiving if we have 160 in training alone, but, we're looking at, possibly up to $800,000 a year. Some of that's gonna be into overtime, some of that's gonna be in software, some of that's gonna be into some of these other categories.
So that's on the training part.
That's on the training part.
Okay.
And then the remaining general operating expenditures, we noticed there's more requirements now as far as postage and mailings, as far as our people that are under collections, and those expenses are going to be going up as well. We also you know, we also have other general expenditures that we, that include civilian uniforms, obviously the fingerprinting, there's first aid. Those costs, we're projecting somewhere around 155, 160,000. But you know, there's document shredding, it's a variety of different expenditures, in addition to the additional postage that's required under law as far as notifying the citizens of them being debtors and past due on their balances as well. Is that or?
Yes.
So moving to the next category of professional services of Commander Oshner, if you can comment. We have additional expenditures required that normally we were classifying under COVID-19 because the reimbursement is more or less over with regard to FEMA. We have to absorb the professional services charge for COVID type expenditures. If you can elaborate further on those type of expenditures.
Yeah, the professional services is our janitorial staff, sanitizing, biohazard remediation, things of that nature, are currently in that category. Also, I don't know that we do it now, I think it's under 5290, but we'll probably move, you know, removal of deceased persons and things of that nature. That's a professional service that we subcontract out, and transportation to the morgue.
Yeah.
So that's gonna be under that category as well.
A big driver of the overall professional services happens to be the fees for collecting the red light cameras. Historically, those fees are 40% of our revenue collections, so we're budgeting accordingly to what for now the expected red light camera revenue, but as we just talked about, that's subject to change as well. Then we're repair and maintenance. We just go over further some of the expenditures. They're driven by primarily your building, your fleet, as well as our hardware and software maintenance. We're going further into recent trends, projecting those expenditures based more on recent trends, as which obviously we all have to be concerned with inflationary pressure and the cost of parts and experience that, you know, it's fair to say that those costs can go up 5 to 10% for that matter, and we should be conservative to expect more of the same of that in the years 24 to 26, unless something dramatically changes as far as it's.
And one add-on to that is, this is gonna kind of mirror with our capital plan over the next 5 years. Our building now is reaching about 22, 23 years old, so our mechanical systems are aging, they're breaking down, we're having catastrophic failures in major components, and we've been trying to kind of paste them back together, and it's not cheap. So it's gonna be one of those things where as this line item continues to trend up, we may want to decide whether we want to invest on the capital side and replace some of these building systems, and it's gonna lower our annual, repair budget.
And we also, I see you having a separate sheet for us to look at later as the capital expenses.
Yes.
And the money's put aside, which would include some of those, like the boiler replacement and the HVAC replacement.
Correct.
Then our equipment, I believe this, there's equipment that we had projected from last year, but there's also some other equipment to be to take in consideration, in addition to, we have the mobile laptops for CSOs, in addition to our office equipment required for police headquarters. For now, conservatively, we're budgeting the same amount as 2022 to accommodate those expenditures. And again, inflationary pressures, it just requires us to be conservative.
We're also having some considerable supply chain problems, so we order something in this budget year, anticipating that we're gonna, use this expenditure in this budget year. And, some of these things are 9, 12, 18 months out. So we're ordering this equipment, and we might not get it until budget year 2024. So we have the budget for it, but we might end up with a surplus because we're not able to take delivery of those things. So you may see that on prior budgets, the same type of things are on that prior budget because we had hoped we had gotten them in the prior year. They just simply weren't available in the numbers that we needed them to be.
Sure.
Quick question, Ben.
Mhm.
So on the unfunded police mandates that were handed out, and there is included the body cameras along with everything associated with that, all those extra costs. Where in this budget is that included? Because I know we have to get that up and running by January 1st of 2024, which means we're gonna have to implement all of this by the end of next year.
Training mandates and the software, the crime reporting, that's reflective in the operating budget.
Mhm.
The body cameras is, you know, we've got to consider that as well in our capital planning as we're updating our capital plan. But the body cameras, as far as the timing wise, it's, you know, it's subject on the capital projects fund to evaluate and make sure that we're capturing everything.
Because by having it say, we have to go live on January 1st, 2025, or is there a grace period? We have to have it installed and then the training and.
Right, well, the problem again is the equipment availability. They're at least 9 months behind, and we haven't put that out to bid yet. If we put that out to bid now, we'd be cutting it really close to meet the mandate. We're anticipating some trailer bills giving us a little more time. I don't know that the market can really accommodate what the state wants us to do at this point, so.
So we might have some extra time on that.
We might have some extra time, and I know in our prior negotiations with some of the vendors, they were willing to adjust our billing where we would take delivery in, say, 1 calendar year, and we wouldn't start our payments until the following calendar year, something along those lines. So we might have a little bit of advanced time to budget for what our expenses are gonna be here. We just don't have the numbers, because again, this is another item that's gonna have to go out to bid. And some of the laws have changed. We weren't exactly sure the exact scope of how many cameras we were gonna need, how much digital storage we were gonna need based on those cameras and so forth. So it's kind of a fluctuating number. And, you know, we're hoping to put an order into maybe the end of the first quarter, but I don't know if we'll take delivery of it in 2023. And if we do take delivery in 2023, it seems likely that we'll be able to push our first payments out into 2024.
Good.
So like the extra clerk that we're gonna need to deal with all the information that's coming in from the cameras, are we gonna include that in the 2024 budget and not in the 2023 then?
Yeah, we've added some spots into the current budget. It's exactly how that's gonna play out hasn't exactly been decided yet. It's gonna depend on which system we choose. Some of the systems are a little more user-friendly than others, some are a little more man-hour friendly than others. So some of the software will do some of the redaction and searching through the videos, keyword searching, you know, face redaction, things like that we're gonna need. So we're gonna need at least one clerk to do that just for court purposes, and possibly we're gonna need another FOIA clerk, because it's an enormous amount of information that's potentially publicly FOIAble. It's gonna have to be watched at length. I mean, you could go on one call and they're there an hour, there's 8 officers there, that's 8 hours of footage that somebody needs to watch for one request. So it's an enormous amount of information that's gonna have to be, somebody's gonna have to look through, so.
Well, the skill level.
This is conservative.
Yeah, the skill level of the person that you hire is gonna be different than.
Yeah, right.
Somebody else.
Are they gonna be a sworn officer or a civilian?
Most likely a civilian,
Okay.
yeah, most likely a civilian.
And so unless something changes, it's all has to be in place by January 1st, 2024.
Well, that's what the state wants us to do, but, you know, some of these things are kind of contingent off of other things. We're gonna have to see how many people we need based on which system we get. I mean, if some of the systems, like I said, have that software built in, and we can get away with doing it with one person, fine. If, you know, if the council decides that they want to spend this money on the system, then we're gonna have to hire more people. So we're gonna get it on one end or the other. That really wasn't necessarily included in here. Right now, we're over, we have some extra clerks here because of catching up with the NIBR system, which is that's a federal mandate that we got down, that went into place last year. And our CAD RMS system is not capable of extracting NIBR's data, so that has to be done manually. So right now, We've had to redeploy some of our clerks just to do NIBRs, and then we had to back hire somebody to do the clerk work. So this is real, the clerks here are real time as far as who might be necessary to do the body cameras. That might be in addition to this.
Okay.
Okay, that leads us to internal service fund that's all predicated on year end and where the claims, workers' comp and general liability claims. For now, we're budgeting the same as 2022, but again, that's subject to change. So, the next area we're gonna talk about is of course our sworn and civilian PD staffing. Again, for our sworn officers, as you're looking at this, at the salaries and wages, we are in negotiation contractual wise. So, for budgeting purposes, for our sworn officers, we are putting a 3% growth in SEP just for budgeting purposes, and that includes longevity, but however, that's all subject to change, because negotiations are pending.
Sure.
So, so with, that being said, the other thing to consider as we have, the administration, which is non-union, and for now, we are just projecting the non-union, 2.75% for now, as far as salaries goes, but beyond that, we're just, presenting 2% growth in salaries, but that is indeed subject to change as well. The other consideration as you're looking at administration, we also, as far as our sworn officers, we have our supervisors, we have Department 55, which we labeled initially detectives, but as Commander Ochsner pointed out, that should actually be titled differently to specialty officers. And then, of course, it is our police officers, Department 57. We have our salaries, wages, and of course, we've done our best to project based on recent trends. And the thing to consider also with these salaries is our benefits, health insurance, dental health insurance. We're budgeting based on 5% growth in health insurance costs, but again, we're fortunate that our broker at Berwyn Insurance, they were able to negotiate virtually zero increase for this year. But again, that could change next year and the years after, so.
That's always in May, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So my concern is the difficult time it is hiring police officers. We have 117 officers currently, with the addition of one that we have at Morton now.
116.
Okay. That it is difficult to hire police officers, and other communities pay more than us, start out more than us. So therefore, when we are looking for officers, they can have opportunities, even when we're doing laterals that come from other communities like Chicago and some of the suburbs, they come here and they can go somewhere else making more money. Also, other communities give a stipend, larger stipend than I think we do. And I know there's a small stipend, but other communities do a larger stipend. So I don't know, we're doing the union contract right now. Are we looking at salaries, the starting level salaries of the new officers that we do hire, so we can attract officers versus lose them to other communities?
We have met with the union, and we entered into a side agreement to start lateral police officers at the base wage rather than the probationary wage, so that helped us attract some better candidates in the lateral police officer department. We are noticing that we're getting fewer applicants for the regular police positions, and that number is actually trending downward. It's definitely something that we can do. We can do that on our end. I don't think that's necessarily needs to be I guess it could be part of the union negotiations, but they typically start in training a little bit less than the other officers.
Okay. Yeah, that's my only concern is what we, to try to retain or hire officers to make sure we're doing the right thing. And in this day and age, it's very difficult to get officers, and it's important that we keep our streets safe. If we're down 4 officers, that means we have to use overtime for that time until we get officers there. And if we have somebody on, workman's comp or out, then that's an issue as well. There's also, I've seen a couple statistics out there that could be approximately 10 officers low compared to where we should be in a community like Berwyn. So those are things that I would like to see. I'll talk to the chief about it, to give us those statistics to make sure that we have enough officers or sworn police officers within our community. And if we're down 10 from, the kind of Midwest state region being close to Chicago and everywhere else, we need to look at the safety of our community. So I'll talk to the chief about that, but that's something we really need to look at. I'm not saying we need to hire 10 extra police officers next year, but if we do have to start looking at that, to hire a couple extra officers a year till we reach that, and if that's the statistics, we should look at that. So I'll talk to the chief about that to make sure moving forward, if we have to do anything with the budget, that we can add that to it. Any questions about that?
Ben, real quick, I had a question for you. I think you might have just explained this, but what's the jump in detective salaries and the reduction in officers? So it looks like
We had talked, Commander Oshner and I, we had specialty officers initially in Department 57, but they should be in 55.
Oh, okay, so
it's
it's
a
like a
repositioning.
long-standing thing that you've not corrected.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, it's.
The latest, I'll make it kind of explain, the latest collective bargaining agreement categorizes officers by their function. The pay, the budget is saying detectives, but there's other officers that get more pay. So a detective, an evidence tech, a juvenile officer, a tactical officer, a traffic officer, a school resource officer, those officers all make the same amount of money. They're not all categorized as detectives. So it made more sense to categorize them by specialty pay rather than by their operational designation, which is detective. So we put everybody who's getting specialty pay in one category, everybody who's not getting specialty pay in another category. And it's the same amount of people, they're just kind of now they're appearing in different general ledger expenditure codes because it made more sense because of how they were being treated on a budget standpoint rather than an operational standpoint.
Gotcha. Thank you.
And we've been doing that for the last couple of years, is kind of eliminating certain areas and moving them to another,
Yeah.
kind of cleaning up the finances.
And then, with our sworn office, looking at the expenditures compared to budget, it's trending, it's tracking consistent so far with what we projected in the 2022 budget overall for that. So, but we'll see what transpires over the next couple months. And then after the sworn officers, we have our auxiliary, as well as our auxiliary staff. We're trending to be lower than our budget based on our existing staffing levels, but that indeed is subject to change. Then our radio operators and dispatchers, Department 61, like our sworn officers, the projection or the expenses are subject to change for budgeting purposes. We will go with the 3% growth in expenditures for now. That includes longevity, but of course that is subject to change as negotiations are pending. Commander Oshner had mentioned, it is possible that in this area that there could be reimbursement from other agencies with regard to these salaries and wages. The remaining, the salaries and benefits, we are the same as spoke about previously, as far as health insurance and dental and related expenditures. The community service officers, we can project the expenditures for 2023 based on the contractual obligation of 2.5%. Beyond that, though, that will run into another negotiation. For now, we'll just put the 2.5% growth until that's been resolved, that's been resolved. Same with booking officers, that's a SEIU contract that we're going to just project what's certain in the contract, 2.5%, but an additional 2.5% afterward. So that leaves us with the non-union clerks, similar to our city's administrative command. The staffing of the clerical civilians will be at 2.75%, consistent with our non-union employees in 2023, but 2024 through 2026, we're just, for budgeting purposes, we're gonna project 2% increase in wages, but again, that's subject to change. And then, of course, rounding off is our crossing guards, part of SEIU as well, under that threshold. So, but overall, PD expenditure, operating expenditures, tracking consistent with what we projected with the 2022 budget. The target is about 75% of the remaining annual budgeted expenditures. So that's our PD operating expenditures. There's no further questions on the operating expenditures. We'll look at the initial capital projects budget on the single page. And in prior years, along with our other bigger departments, Public Works and the Fire Department, the PD was able to make a capital contribution from its operating budget. In 2021 is $75,000, as well as in 2022 another $75,000. As the city is working on updating its capital improvement program, we're gonna hold off on projecting a certain dollar amount until we see the full, the final, the document finalized. So with that being said, Commander Oshner has pointed out some immediate areas that need addressing in the capital projects: squad car replacement, boiler replacement, HVAC, consideration of replacing the HVAC system to mitigate existing raise in repair maintenance costs. Any further commentary on the capital projects?
No, again, the squad car replacement, that's again plagued by logistics and supply chain. We're 2, sometimes 3 years behind in those orders as well. It's been difficult for us because we make an order, we may get it, we may not get it. And the one year we ordered new cars, we got the new cars, and then we got cars from 2 years before that showed up as well. So yeah, that's going to be difficult. Cars just aren't available. If they are available, we kind of have to jump on them because we can't anticipate. You know what? We'll just buy it next year because it'll be available next year. It may not be next year. Maybe 3 years beyond that. So it's kind of one of those things where I think it's very important we maintain a regular schedule of ordering because the availability may just not be there.
Before, we used to go a lot through the state purchasing cooperation, they had those set prices, but now that's almost non-existent just because no one can get cars, so it's basically at whatever the market says, is that correct?
That's correct. We're noticing vehicles anywhere from $20,000 to $40,000 above sticker cost right now. It's kind of just it's a seller's market, and we're being forced to buy civilian models of certain things in certain cases and improvise, and then that's causing us to have to do modifications on our equipment, and the costs just kind of go exponential from there because it's just kind of not what we had planned on. Bidding is almost impossible because by the time we go through the bidding process, somebody else would have bought the vehicle, nobody's holding anything because there's just, the Ford dealer told us that there was, they were expecting 300 of these vans that we had ordered, they got 3. We ended up buying a civilian model from another dealership because that was the only one available, and ours was broken down. So anticipate that continuing. Can't get the chips, can't get the parts, can't get the cars. I see it only getting worse, and I see expenses only getting higher.
When is our construction gonna start?
We have a-
Well, he's, Commander Ashner's been the one that's been dealing with the design, and project management, so he can give you an update right now.
We're hoping for spring, of next year. We have a meeting on Friday to finalize our projected budget. Again, the problem we're having there is same thing everybody else is having, labor costs, material costs, and availability of the building materials. So we're hoping to break ground in spring. It's an 18-month project. In a perfect world, it may take longer. You know, we had some of the union strikes and things like that that happened this summer that delayed some of the road construction projects. So those kind of things are gonna impact us as well. You know, concrete, asphalt is now at a premium because of the petroleum market kind of going up and down and availability, so we don't know. We're hoping to break ground in spring. Bids should be going out in the very near future for some of the materials we need, but again, that's, we're at the mercy of whatever the world decides for us.
Okay. All right.
What's the status on the license plate readers?
There's some of them are in production already. I don't know the exact number. I think, maybe about half of what was projected are up right now. I know that some of them are kind of trapped into licensing with the Department of Transportation. IDOT kind of came up with a unique interpretation of their administrative rules that even if the camera isn't on a designated state route, if it sees the designated state route, they have jurisdiction over the camera. So we've been kind of trying to work on some of those things through the administrative process, so but we're trying to keep them on our good side.
Okay.
That's,
Any other questions or anything? So if you want to go through this on your own, if you have questions, if you want to call Commander Ashner with any questions, or, you know, go visit the police department to go through it, if you have questions. This is a draft, so this is confidential, so if you can keep it amongst yourselves, and if you have any questions, you can go to the police department. That being said, any other new business or anything we want to talk about? We need to schedule a few more meetings, so we could probably talk about that if we are gonna entertain a few more meetings here, and if we are going to schedule them, so we can talk afterwards and
Sure.
figure out what to do there. Schedule them that way. Okay, I just need a meeting, or a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.
What are the names we got scheduled?
tomorrow is the public works.
We have Public Works,
Yeah.
and then,
Then we have the draft, no, it's the draft for the tax.
yeah.
tax levy.
And if we are
Yeah.
gonna meet with any other departments, we can talk about that.
Yes.
It's just me that we need to meet with.
Yep.
These are the three that we've done.
Those are the big
The one
ones.
tomorrow, the biggest ones, so we'll go from there.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.